loud. It's recording now. All right. Welcome everybody to our parent webinar with the topic of functions of behavior. My name is Karina Hernandez. I'm a behavioral analyst at Bright Horizons Developmental Services.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jasmine Soto, and I am a parent trainer and supervisor with Bright Horizons.
Once again, thank you so much for joining us today. As I mentioned today, we will be touching the subject of functions of behavior. To start off our presentation, I would like to share a couple of pictures with you all and open up a poll to get some input of what information you know regarding this topic. So in the first picture, we have a picture of a phone that looks like someone is checking traffic. So let's go ahead and launch our first poll and answer whenever you have a chance. The question is, what would be a possible function if someone looks at their GPS to check traffic every morning? I'll go ahead and give a couple of seconds for everybody to answer. They're coming in, and I'm going to go ahead and end poll. We will review these questions at the end of our presentation. And let's go ahead and move on to the next picture. Here's the second image, and our question of the day is, what would be a possible function if someone continues to receive good grades and certificates of recognition? Give a couple of seconds for everybody to input their answer. All right, we will end that poll and look at one more picture. All right, for this following picture, what would be a possible function for scratching others? A couple more seconds for everybody to answer. Awesome. All right, like I mentioned, we will review these questions at the end of our presentation. For now, sit tight, listen to all this information we have to give to you, and we'll go ahead and get started. So the topic of behaviors of function is a very common topic that we as specialists like to provide to families to have a better understanding of the behaviors of their child. It is a topic that will continuously come up because behavior is happening at all times. So it is our job to help you understand what is the purpose of identifying the functions of behavior and what are the tools necessary to target challenging problem behaviors or behaviors of concern that you have as a parent. So a couple of things that we will be touching today is, one, what are they? What are the functions of behavior and why are they so important? Two, we're going to learn how to identify the function of behaviors by using a method known as the ABC data. Three, we're going to take a closer look at each function, which are access, escape, attention, and sensory. And then at the end, we're going to recap all of the information given to you and go over the questions that you just answered. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. What are the functions of behavior and why are they so important? Let's look at this definition. Behaviors that are repeated have some sort of function. Identifying the function of behavior means finding out why the behavior is occurring. This means taking a closer look at what happens before, during, and after the behavior. A pattern can let us know why this behavior is occurring and when it's likely to occur. As you can see, there's a couple words that pop out more. As you can also see, this definition is quite long, just like this topic. It's very complex. So let's take a look at these words that are highlighted to have a better understanding of what functions of behavior are. So when we're looking at a behavior of concern, we know this behavior becomes a concern because it's occurring through time. It's repeated. And when a behavior is happening over time and over time, it means that the behavior is working. It's accomplishing something. And it's accomplishing something that the child or human being wants. And when they're doing this, it's because they have a function, they have a reason, they have something that they're wanting to accomplish for engaging this behavior, which we can also learn, we can also identify it as the why, the function. When you think about the word why, always put it hand in hand with the word function. So once that behavior is happening and happening and happening over time, we get to identify a pattern. And that pattern includes three components: what's happening before, during, and after, which we will then learn about the ABC data form of collecting information about the behavior. But when we look at a behavior, it's important that we look at the pattern around it, what's happening before it, how the behavior looks like, and what's our response, what's happening after. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that might look like. So why are behaviors so, the functions of behavior so important? Well, they're so important because they happen to everybody. I want you to imagine yourself being part of this picture here. Imagine that you're behind this car and it's 7:55 in the morning. Your shift starts at 8 a.m. and you are 2 exits away from your job. You automatically know that you're going to be late to work. And then you start feeling some sort of feelings of frustration, anger, stressed, whatever you might feel in these situations, and start engaging in behaviors like this gentleman in the picture, hitting his head on the steering wheel, honking at other drivers, trying to merge into the other lane, yelling at other cars, or what that might ever look like to you. But at the end of the situation, you still get to work late. You get to work and possibly your supervisors or your coworkers call your attention, or you have to stay a little bit later in order to make up the time that you arrived late, or whatever the story might be. So that day ends and the next day comes around. You remember what happened Monday at 7:55 in the morning on your way to work, and you decide to take out your phone to check traffic, to see if there's an alternative route in order for you to arrive to work quicker and in order to avoid that traffic. This situation of you bringing out your phone, plugging in your work's address is a behavior itself. It's a behavior in order for you to avoid that situation of being late to someplace. So as you can see, behavior also applies to us as an adult. I know that you are here today for your child, but something that has helped me to better understand behavior is knowing that behavior is constantly happening, and it applies to everybody. In this picture, you see young kids very happy. They're smiling, they're showing off their certificates and their awesome scores on their quizzes. And let's pretend that this is not the first time a kiddo has received this grade. Every time that they receive recognition, good grades, their parents, their teachers, their peers give them a lot of praise and recognition. They get their papers hung up on the fridge or saved in a special place. They receive so much attention that they are encouraged to continue to engage in this behavior. In this picture, in these examples, I want you to realize that when we're looking at behavior and the functions of behavior, I want you to see that behavior is also behavior that we want to increase, behavior that we want to keep, that we want our children to learn. So in this instance, we want our children to continue to receive that recognition, certificates, and those good grades. Often we look at behaviors of functions for behaviors that are more challenging and problem, and a challenge to the lives of our child and to ourselves. But I also want you to recognize that even behaviors like this have a function. And lastly, I want you to take a look at all these pictures. In the far left, we have a picture of two young little kiddos that look like they're twins. And we have one kiddo that's scratching the other kiddo's face. And we're going to assume that typically this kid scratches the other kiddo's faces in order to gain access to that toy or any other preferred item. And then on the top right, we have a picture of a little kiddo Crying, falling to the floor, what it looks like to be in a toy store. And typically this kid, whenever he's told no to a toy that parents cannot purchase at the moment, he falls to the ground and begins to yell. And then lastly, at the bottom right, we have a baby that's crying, grasping onto his mom's phone in order to continue watching Cocomelon, whatever it might be. So in these instances, we all see that there's a common feature. There's that common factor for these kiddos that they want something. They want to get access to something, but all the behaviors look different. There's some kiddos scratching, there's some kiddos falling, there's some kiddos crying, some yelling. So behavior looks so different to everybody. So it is very important to get a deeper look into that behavior, what it looks like, and why it's occurring. So now that we have related a little bit more about functions of behavior and why they're important, we're going to take a look at how to identify the function. As mentioned before, there's 3 factors that are part of identifying the function of a behavior. Those 3 factors are antecedent, behavior, and consequence. Antecedent is what happens before behavior. Behavior is what it looked like. And the consequence is what did we do as a response. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple examples to give us a better idea of what these 3 factors are. So in this picture, you see a young little kiddo crying, and we're going to assume parent is taking away the iPad. So the antecedent is taking away iPad. The behavior in this instance is crying and holding on to the iPad, and the consequence is the iPad was given back and the crying stopped. So this was one time that it happened. Let's see if our pattern continues to build. So in this picture, we have the same kiddo now playing with the rocket toy. In the antecedent, the parent takes away the rocket, time for bedtime, and the behavior is crying and holding on to the rocket. And our consequence is the rocket was given back and the crying stopped. Last example is same kid. Now he's at a store. He saw this cool toy car that he wants, and parent says time to go, tries to take away the toy, and the kiddo, which is the antecedent, and the behavior is crying and holding on to the car, and the consequence is the car was given back and the crying stopped. So in these these examples that I showed you, there was a pattern that was building up, and the pattern can let us know why the behavior is occurring and when it's likely to occur. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a poll that will allow everybody to input and help me out find out what the antecedent was for the past 3 examples. Okay, so what was the antecedent? 1, taking away a preferred item, or 2, going to bed. I'll give everybody a couple of seconds to input their answers. All right, 2 more seconds. All right, so the antecedent was taking away the preferred item. That is correct. For each example, there was something taken away that was highly preferred for the child, and that's what triggered the behavior. That's what happened before the behavior. So now let's go ahead and identify together what is the behavior. Falling to the floor or crying. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share the answer, and the behavior was crying. Definitely, each instance, the behavior was crying for this kiddo. All right, and last one. Everybody, please help me identify the consequence. 1, the parent played with the toy and crying stopped, or 2, the parent gave a child access to the toy and crying stopped. Couple more seconds. All right. And the correct answer and what everyone voted for was the parent gave child access to the toy again and the crying stopped. That is correct. Every instance, that was our response. Not saying it was a correct response, but that's what happened. And thankfully, because after collecting this information, we now know what's maintaining the behavior. Sometimes our consequences, what's maintaining our behavior and why it's still happening. So we have to make those switches around. But also based on this information that we collected, every time the behavior was happening, we are now more likely to know when the behavior is going to happen. So for example, every time we have to take away a preferred item from our kiddo, we can predict that behavior will happen. So we have to then act upon those triggers for our kiddo and apply some ideas for a kid to accept letting go of a toy and so forth. So it allows us to then brainstorm and come up with the appropriate strategies for a kiddo to accept that, to prevent behavior, and also to learn new skills. So now that we covered this, I will pass it on to Jasmine and she will be touching on the 4 functions of behavior.
Thank you, Karina, for that very useful information. Let's jump right in and look at each function. So now we're going to look at our first function, which is access. Access is defined as, when a child engages in this type of behavior to gain access to something that is of value to them. So something that they want, we see a behavior. Let's look at the next slide. Examples. So we have a little girl tantruming when denied a cookie. I'm sure this is something we're all too familiar with in our homes with our kids. So we'll talk a little bit about what we can do to help in those situations. A child hitting mom who took away a tablet. So taking away something as preferred as a tablet can be very upsetting for children. And we also often see that undesired behavior from them. And screaming when sibling touches toys. Siblings, if that's one thing they can do, is they can fight over the same toy. So let's look at some things that we can target in the next slide. So when we're dealing with examples like the ones mentioned, we can try, first and foremost, picking our battles, right? We're not able to deal with every situation 24/7 because obviously we have other things going on. Sometimes it's not possible because of our schedule. So just think about situations that you're able to apply these interventions and strategies that we're going to try. And in those other situations where you can't, it's okay. Don't be hard on yourself about it. Just think about, it's probably best to not deny access to something if we can't follow through with the interventions that we're going to recommend, because then we end up, rewarding and reinforcing problem behavior. So if you can't do it, it's not a big deal. Just when you are able to, try these things, okay? So let's practice not giving access to the item during problem behavior. And I know this is really difficult because it solves the problem, right? Child is crying for a cookie, you give them a cookie, they stop crying, you can go on with whatever you are doing. But in the long run, that just shows our children that this is what I need to do to get what I want. And, that just becomes a bigger problem after time. So let's just instead teach our child to acceptable alternatives to obtain that access. So, if they've had their fill of cookies, you can offer an apple or banana, because that can give them that redirection of like, okay, well, I can't have this. Sometimes when we just say no to something, our children just stay focused on that, like, I can't have this and I want it so much, and they're just so overwhelmed with that. But if we redirect it, well, you can have an apple or a banana, that might give them that sense of control, like, okay, well, I can still choose something. I know obviously a cookie does not compare to an apple or a banana, but the idea is that by presenting choices, we can give them that sense of control, and they'll be able to be redirected away from that item that's no longer available. So the other option that you can do is reinforce for engaging an acceptable alternative to obtain access. So always, 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 when we see behavior that we want more of, it's really important to be very vocal about it and let them know, like, hey, that's a great choice, or look how nice you chose that apple. It's so yummy and crunchy, and just giving them that reward, and seeing them that having them see that, okay, I can choose something else and it's okay, it's I'll get a cookie some other time. So let's really try and avoid giving your child what they want during problem behavior. And like I said, I know it solves the issue in the moment, but in the long run, it just makes the problem get bigger and bigger. So try not to do that. Again, as I mentioned in the first part about picking your battles, if you're in a situation where family's over, grandparents are over, that spoil our babies so much and want to give them everything, then maybe, that's a battle you don't want to, go to. That's a battle you don't want to deal with. So just like, okay, grandpa's over, he can give you whatever snacks you want. But when it's mommy or daddy time, then everything's back to business as usual. So try not to stress over those things. So let's look at the next slide, which will discuss some things you can say. So, sorry, honey, cookies aren't available, but you can have an apple or banana. That's one. Or you know what, the tablet's all done, but you can play with your truck, or you can have bubbles. So giving those two options will help kind of dissuade them from having that focus on, I was denied something and I wanted it so much. They'll be able to be redirected to something else. Okay, so now let's talk about escape. Escape is defined as when a child engages in this type of behavior to avoid or escape a demand or non-preferred task or activity. This one's a little tricky because it's often reinforced by us and we don't even know it. But the good thing is that you guys are here now and you'll be able to see some of the little tricks that our kids use on us and we're not even aware of that are happening. So let's take a look at some examples. With escape, a child hits when asked to sit down to complete an activity, and what does that turn into? That turns into, my child was aggressive, so I'm going to, obviously as a parent, not allow any type of aggression. So what am I going to do? I'm going to reprimand. I'm going to send them to timeout. And lo and behold, our babies are not doing the activity we asked. They're having that time off by, getting that timeout and the reprimand. So it's really important to kind of really use that ABC information that Karina discussed, because it's going to help you see what happened right before, so you can connect with what's the best way to respond so that this behavior does not continue to happen. Okay, so we see in another example, a child walks away and refuses to take a nap. Sometimes our babies just give us that hard time when we put them down for naps. And sometimes we're just like, okay, well, fine, you don't want to nap, don't nap, and then we just let them like linger around and be fussy toddlers and deal with that until they go to bedtime. So, but then sometimes that turns into, oh well, all I need to do is get up and walk away a couple of times, and then mom and dad are just going to give up and I don't have to nap anymore. So just identifying those situations is really important for you to not reinforce that behavior and continue that desired behavior that we want, which we know naps are so important for our babies, help them regulate throughout the day, and they're just happier little people when they get their naps. Even us as adults, we may avoid going into the kitchen to not wash the dishes. I know, if there's a big pile, I might wait for my husband to notice it and pretend like I didn't see it. So, we all engage in these type of escape behaviors, even like keeping the clothes in the dryer to avoid putting it away, because it's so easy to just throw clothes in the in the washer and dryer, right? But the hard part is putting it away. So sometimes, we engage in these escape behaviors in that instance. So let's look at some strategies that we can use for escape. Let's try and give a heads up about the upcoming low preferred activity and lower demands. So our kids, sometimes we may think that they understand these cues of, okay, well, I've been here long enough, I've been out here in the playground long enough, and it's almost time for dinner. Sometimes our children do have that feel, and we don't need to transition them without any issues, but sometimes transitions are really hard, right? So that's when we get our children trying to escape these activities that are not as preferred as what they're doing. So if our child's on the tablet and we're saying, okay, it's time for bath time, they might like bath time, but tablet's number one. So it's really important to, just give them a heads up, like, hey, buddy, in 5 more minutes, we're going to be going and having our bath time, and, I'll give you the bubbles that you like. And of course, our kids probably they don't have that awareness of 5 minutes, but they're given a heads up, like something's going to happen soon, and you can, even if your child needs it, you can say, okay, 3 more minutes, 1 more minute, and then you can do a little countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, all done, come on, let's go, and you help them on over. So just having those, that heads up will help significantly with that transition to the lower preferred activities. It's really important to redirect to task. Sometimes our kids, they might throw themselves on the floor or hit sibling, anything to side swipe or get that attention away from that upcoming activity. So your goal when we give a demand is to focus on that demand. We can pick up the mess after. We can, if they threw their crayons on the floor all over and we have them pick them up one by one, that's a whole lot of time they're avoiding doing a task that they didn't want to do in the first place. So just focus on that. If it's something that they're trying to avoid, let's just encourage them, because we already gave them the heads up to complete the task. And once they're all done, then they can go ahead and clean up that mess they made. Always, like I mentioned, reinforce for compliance. So the moment they get up and started acting or initiating in that behavior, reinforce, like, whoa, look how nice you listen, or good job being a big boy, listening and doing your, going into the bath or taking your shirt off. That's great. Children really love that praise, and it's really important for them to understand, because they'll know that that's what we want more of, and they'll be encouraged to do more of that behavior. So also always, teach your child to use their words, signs, or pecs to communicate. So if your child needs a break, or if your child does not want to do that, that's also an option. We just won't take hitting mom in the face as an appropriate way to get out of something. They can say all done if that's what you've been working on. They can request a break, with their signs. That's more appropriate than, a slap on the face. So avoid ignoring. Sometimes our children engage in tantrum behavior, and then our go-to is like, well, I'm just going to ignore them because, they'll just stop doing it eventually. But ignoring allows for more of that avoidance and escape from the task. And so we don't want to do that. And we also want to avoid timeout, right? Timeout is the same thing. They're not getting that opportunity to engage in that activity that you requested them to. So really focusing on bringing them to the activity. Once they complete it, then we can move on to the next thing. So let's look at some scripts, some things that we can practice. For escape, timer to have a clear end of task. This is really this is a really good strategy to use, because sometimes we have activities that don't have like a defined end, right? So I think about coloring, brushing teeth, I don't know what, sometimes even snack time, or we don't want them, they feel like I'm gonna have to be here forever, and I don't want to even, be there in the first place. But we provide a timer like, look, buddy, we're going to brush your teeth for 3 minutes. Once the timer goes off, then we're going to go ahead and be all done. Or look, I just want you to scribble here with mommy for 1 minute. Once you're done scribbling, then we're going to be all done. We're going to put it away. That will increase the likeliness that your child will stay on task, which is what we want, right? Especially for those low preferred activities. Always follow through with directive and cue your child to ask for a break. So if you start to see that they're getting wiggly in their chair, or, our children show us those cues before they engage in that behavior. So once you start picking up on those cues that, okay, he's about had it, he needs a break, go ahead and cue them. Like, do you need a break? Are you all done? Maybe they're done stacking the blocks and they're just thinking like, well, I'm just going to start throwing the blocks that we're stacking and that's how I'll get out of it, but once you see that they're kind of not so interested, you can go ahead and cue them to ask for all done or break, and always reward when compliant. All right, so now we're going to talk about the function of attention. The child engages in this type of behavior to gain others' attention. Oh my goodness, attention-seeking behaviors can be very stressful for us as parents because we are supposed to tend to our every child's need. And in this situation, it's kind of a little bit, we have to go the opposite of what we're inclined to do. So let's talk about that. Let's look at some examples about attention. We've all seen, the lovely hitting self when adult is on the phone. The moment we get on the phone, our children's antennas go off and they know that, oh, mom is on the phone, so I need to go ask her for 35 things because she's likely to give them to me, since she just wants me to get away. So getting that attention from us on the phone happens all too often. Yelling when mom and dad are having a conversation, sometimes that attention away from them is not desired and they seek more of it. So especially when you're engaged in a conversation with an adult. And then another key one to identify attention seeking behavior is when a child looks at the adult while engaging in inappropriate behavior. And we've all had those moments where our kid will turn around and look at us just to make sure we're looking before they spill something or attempt to climb something. So that's very indicative of an attention-seeking behavior if they're looking at you while they're doing it. So let's look at some strategies that we can try with this behavior. It's essential that we ignore the inappropriate behavior. So I know that's like counterintuitive, right? Ignoring inappropriate behavior. No, we're parents, we're supposed to correct inappropriate behavior. But that's not the case actually with attention-seeking behavior, because if we give them that attention that they're seeking, they're gonna keep doing it and they'll up the ante. So we don't want that. So, and obviously if a child is, engaging in some sort of inappropriate behavior where they're at risk or someone else is at risk, we're not just going to let them engage in that behavior, or if they're hurting themselves. There are ways to ignore the inappropriate behavior while still, keeping our kids safe. So we'll talk about that. It's really important to teach our children. Whoopsie. It's really important to teach our children to ask for attention appropriately. Those tools are essential. I know sometimes our kids might go and give us a smack for attention. We can turn that smack shape it into a tap on the shoulder or a tap on the leg. That's more appropriate than, the good old smack that they give us sometimes. And we can also focus on providing attention for appropriate behavior. The moment they tap us, the moment they say mama, the moment they say help, then we, flood them with all that attention that they desire, so that they can increase that type of behavior and they'll know, well, this really works. When I call mama or when I tap mama, she turns and she gives me that attention that I need. But it's not so easy when, I smack her or, throw myself on the floor. She just, I get nothing from that. So, then they'll be more willing to do the behavior that they get that reinforcement from. So we always encourage praise and reinforcement throughout the day. There are many opportunities for doing that throughout the day, just catching them when they're good and giving them that reward. So avoid reprimands. Why avoid reprimands? Because chances are your child already knows that the behavior they're doing is inappropriate, which is why they're doing it in the first place. They know, if I do this, mom does not like it or dad does not like it, and I get something, I get a reaction out of them. So it's extra. It's not necessary. They already know they're not supposed to be doing it. So when we talk about like not giving our child attention, that means we're not looking at them. We're not laughing. Sometimes, they're doing stuff and they're on top of us, we're their furniture, even holding them or hugging them. That's affection and attention. We want to withhold from that when they're engaging in inappropriate behavior. Even discussing the behavior with others in the room. So I know sometimes our children might not have the language to engage in conversation, but they know when we're talking about them. So even you talking about them with others in the room is giving them that attention that they might be seeking. So let's see what we can try instead. Withhold eye contact or reprimand. If your child is on the floor crying, banging their head, you want to make sure they're not injuring themselves, they're not hurting themselves. So you can go over to them, put a pillow under their head without looking at them and without telling them anything. Or you can pick their little bodies, tantruming bodies up, put them on the carpet where they can, do whatever tantrum they need to do and they might not hurt themselves. This is an appropriate strategy for withholding attention, because you're not there. You're just, you're blank, you're looking away, you're grabbing them, you're putting them down, and you go somewhere else. You don't tell them anything. Even if, let's say, you're on the phone and your child starts smacking you because they want something, you can go ahead and model that appropriate behavior on yourself. So you can show them, without telling them or looking at anything, you can model like, tap, so that they tap you. And in the moment they tap you, then you can give them that appropriate attention. And reward when using acceptable ways of seeking attention. So those things that you're practicing with them, they're going to spontaneously start using them themselves. And if we reinforce that, if we reward that when they're doing it, then they're going to keep doing it, because our children love praise from us. Alrighty, let's look at sensory. The behavior serves no other purpose than to provide the child with sensory input. So this is not a socially reinforcing behavior. This has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them and their bodies. So let's look at some examples. Child frequently gets up and runs around the doctor's office. We've all been there, right? Just hoping that we're going to walk into an empty doctor's office so that we don't have to contain our small toddler for an extended period of time. Sometimes our children flap hands when they're exposed to overstimulating environment. They're, surrounded by a whole lot of stuff going on, and the hand flapping starts. Engaging in body rocking when asked to sit. Sometimes that request for sitting can be very challenging for our kids, and sitting might not be something they can do for prolonged periods of time. So let's talk about some things that we can try for these type of situations. We can try and provide alternative source of sensory input. So that is a big mouthful right there. What alternative source of sensory input means? Let's find a way that they can get the same sensation in a way that's more appropriate for the moment. Okay, so we'll discuss some examples of that right now. Also, we don't want to allow increased access to the behavior, right? We're not just going to say, well, my child has a wiggly, so he can go ahead and destroy the doctor's office. That's not, that's not appropriate. It's not socially appropriate. So it's important to interrupt and redirect the behaviors if your child can get hurt or hurt others. That's probably a good reason to interrupt and redirect the behavior. If it interrupts learning, is also a situation where, hand flapping might be okay if, our baby just listening to some nursery songs and they're doing their little happy dance with the hand flapping, totally fine. But maybe hand flapping when they're being presented with an activity might be challenging and might not allow for them to be able to focus on learning. So this is when we would want to continue with providing an alternative sensory input. And if it's socially inappropriate, like I mentioned, with destroying a doctor's office, maybe they can jump around on your sofas. It's okay, but it's probably socially inappropriate if they do that at the doctor's. So avoid withholding attention. We can't pretend like, oh, I'm going to ignore them and they're going to stop. They're not, because they're not doing it for your attention, right? They're doing it because it feels good to them. So let's just give them something else that will give them that good feeling that's more appropriate. Such as planning ahead and getting some movement before the office visit. So we know we go to the doctors, or we go to restaurants, or we want to do, we want to go to church. And those are situations where our child might have to be sitting for a prolonged period of time. So it's essential that we maybe make sure that they get some movement before the visit, so they get those wigglies or that need out of their system, and also bringing some options to help keep them busy. So that there's not going to be much for them to do. Pack a little bag with some Play-Doh, with a fidget spinner, some crayons, whatever they like that can keep them busy and give them some input is going to be very helpful and beneficial to them and to you overall. Okie dokie. And here are some things to consider. So always seek medical attention immediately if a function is unknown. So we want to avoid ignoring or reprimanding the behavior. We know that, sometimes our kids engage in some quirky behavior that then we're like, oh, that was actually, my child was just pulling on his ear and that turned out to be an ear infection, that type of thing. So if you feel like, I'm not really sure why he's doing that, let's just run it by the pediatrician. Once we know that it's not a medical issue, we can go ahead and help you with some strategies, identifying some things that we can help with. And as Karina mentioned in her portion, she discussed that there's behavior that is the same and it has different functions. So not throwing yourself on the floor isn't always for attention. It could be for escape. It could be for access. So take the time to pause and identify what happened right before the behavior using that ABC data. And say these are priorities. So targeting behavior that can cause risk to your child or others is essential. If you do feel like, oh, okay, well, there are some things that are, really concerning to me, reach out to your team for support. We're here to help you and come up with some strategies. Alrighty, and this is my portion. I will send it back to Karina so we can get some answers on those questions that we had initially.
Thank you, Jasmine. Lots of great information for all the functions of behavior. Definitely information that we're going to continue to expose to everybody, that you're going to continue to learn. But now we're going to go ahead and take a look at those pictures again. I want you to go ahead and answer the question now based on the information that you received and see if your answer changed or remained the same. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first picture that we looked at and answer the following question. So what would be a possible function if someone looks at their GPS to check traffic every morning? I'll go ahead and give everybody a couple of seconds. 2 more seconds. All right. So everybody answered this question correctly at the beginning and right now at the moment. So you're very familiar with this one, possibly because you as adults know that we don't like traffic. We don't want to get to places late. We want to avoid it as much as possible. So this is an amazing idea to prevent all that traffic, taking out our phone and making sure that we take the route that has the less traffic to our destination. So awesome job. So remember, in this example, we talked a little bit about how behavior applies to everybody, not only to our children, but even us as an adults. And if you have other children in your home, hopefully this information can apply to them as well. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the second picture and answer the second question. All right, so what would be a possible function if someone continues to receive good grades and certificates of recognition? All right, 3 more seconds. All right, so in this answer, everybody answered A, attention, to get special recognition from parents and teachers. In this example, I gave the story plot of these children giving their certificates to parents because they were giving them so much praise. They got their name announced in class at a ceremony, and they even got their certificate hung up on the fridge. So in this situation, these kiddos continue to engage in this behavior necessary in order to receive their certificates, in order to get attention from their parents. So as you can see, behaviors are also behaviors that we want to teach our children, the skills that we want them to learn in order to have a fulfilling life, in order for them to broaden their horizons, and also for them to learn more appropriate behaviors down the road. All right, and the last picture and last question of the day is, what would be a possible function for scratching others? Couple more seconds. All right, thank you everyone for participating. So in this instance, yes, the little boy wants access to get to play with the stuffed animal his brother's playing with. So typically once that scratch happens, hey, that toy lets go and he gets a chance with it. So they're more likely to scratch in the future in order to get more access to that toy. So in all these pictures, I do want to take a time to note that in all of these instances, that we have to also build a pattern. Maybe for our kiddos that are scratching, we notice that they're scratching not only their siblings, but parents or anybody they come across in order to gain access to something, so that we're seeing that pattern happening. I know I threw out the story for you, so thank you so much for participating and giving us your input. And I hope that all this information was helpful to everybody in these examples. So lastly, to close it off, let's just go ahead and recap what we covered today. So we learned about functions of behavior. Remember, when you think about the word function, I want you to relate it to the word why. Why am I doing this? Why is my child engaging in that behavior? And that's when you have to refer back to those functions. But before you go into those functions, you want to identify the function by taking ABC data. You want to know what's happening, antecedent, before the behavior, what the behavior looks like, and C, the consequence. What was our response? After we have identified that function, we are able to identify why the behavior is occurring and when it's likely to occur. Something I do want to point out in this point, at this part of the presentation, is that we also created a presentation for antecedent strategies. So where most of these behaviors, our goal as parent and teachers is to prevent that behavior, because that will be an easier moment for you and your child in their learning experience. We are able to prevent the behaviors because we now know what's causing those behaviors. So in our YouTube channel, we have a presentation on antecedent strategies that help you identify what's the best antecedent strategy for your child's behavior in order to prevent it in the future. And lastly, we learned about the 4 main functions of behavior: sensory, escape, attention, and tangibles, access to tangibles. So we saw that all of these functions, we have to try different things and avoid different things. And it's sometimes important to know what the function is so we avoid doing the incorrect response to that behavior. So hopefully all these examples and information were helpful to you. I once again, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, here are our Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube links. Feel free to follow us and comment on any of our content and ask us questions. Thank you everyone for today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Stop the recording. Stop recording. Yes.